hopefully everyone has trickled in by now. If you're just joining us, thank you so much. Hello and welcome to Ashley Madison's Love Beyond Lockdown panel. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Canela López. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I'm a sex and relationships reporter for Business Insider. Today, I'll be your moderator, so looking forward to that. Today's conversation will delve into a hot topic under normal circumstances, and even hotter topic in quarantine, love. Our panel of experts will be discussing the findings of Ashley Madison's Love Beyond Lockdown report, which surveyed countless of its own members on fidelity, sex, and intimacy during the pandemic. We'll be looking at how people cheat, why people cheat, and what the future of monogamy even is in light of what some say feels like the end of the world as we know it. You'll have a chance to submit your questions at the end. But with no further ado, let me introduce our panel of experts. Dr. Tammy Nelson is a certified sex and relationship therapist and licensed counselor with 30 years of experience, a TEDx speaker, host of the Trouble of Sex podcast, and the executive director of the Integrative Sex Therapy Institute. She is also an author of 5 books, with her 6th, Open Monogamy, a guide to co-creating your ideal relationship agreement, is due in 2021. Sorry, I have my rabbit next to me. You'll have to forgive Benito for making a guest appearance. Up next is Lucy Beresford, a UK-based psychotherapist, TEDx speaker, and author of 4 books, including Happy Relationships. She's also a broadcaster, best known as the LBC's Naughty Mary Poppins, love the title, and a host of hashtag Mind Over Matter Mondays on her Instagram Live. Check her out. I really enjoy her lives. They're really good. And yeah, last but not least, Lara Ferreiro is a couples and sex therapist based in Madrid, professor and TEDx speaker. She also has appeared in a number of Spanish language broadcasts, giving her expertise on all things sex and relationships. I also highly recommend you check out her YouTube channel, which has all of her broadcasts on it. It's very good. And also joining us from Ashley Madison is Christoph Kraemer. He is the managing director of Western Europe. He first joined Ashley Madison, the team, nearly a decade ago in 2011. After a few years away, Kraemer rejoined the Ashley Madison team in June 2019. He'll be handling all the logistical questions about the report and any questions we have about Ashley Madison. But now that everyone is introduced, let's get started. So the first primary finding of the report is that many married couples are not having sex in lockdown or since the beginning of the pandemic. So Christoph, I'd love to get more information about that, kind of what the findings are.
That's really 6% of our members said they were only having sex once a month or less, which already, at least in my book, is not that often. Now, with the pandemic and lockdown, half of our members said that they are spending more time with their spouse or partner than ever before, and yet 3 out of 4 are having even less sex than before the pandemic. So clearly, something is happening there that is not working for couples, and that is a problem for many marriages and many relationships.
Definitely. I'm curious if the panelists have seen this in your practice, if there's been an uptick in clients not having sex in quarantine.
Well, in my practice, I think it's definitely true that there's a majority of people that are coming into my practice saying, my partner's driving me crazy and our relationship is really stressed. The things that would normally distract you, like work, going out with friends, getting out in the world, are not there. And so the things that you would normally ignore, like leaving dishes in the sink or socks on the floor, are now a major problem. So there's really no distractions. And plus, I think attraction happens in the space in between you. So you sort of long for something over there. When it's sitting on the couch next to you every night, not so much. So there is a big portion of the people that I see that are having less sex than they've ever had before. And it's really hard to climb over that big pile of resentment in the middle of the bed. So it's taking more effort to get to that place where they feel connected again.
I'm curious, Lucy, Lara, have y'all also seen this?
Okay, yes, I think the lockdown, as Tammy said, had an impact, but I also think it perhaps magnified issues that were there before. And what I've noticed is that the problem is that because there wasn't enough different energy coming into that couple from the outside, that it got consumed inside, kind of it got dried up. And there were so many ways in which people were stressing about other things. So normal life was also affected, perhaps money worries. We had people who were made redundant or furloughed. We know that that's going to also impact on our sense of confidence, our desirability. So even just the pandemic itself was making people feel less attractive, less aroused, and more stressed. And of course, the stress was contributing to that lack of sex.
And I have two cases of patients in this quarantine. It's so interesting for me. One of them, he has been unfaithful for the first time in his life. This couple has a child, and he felt that after the first child, rejected and very bad with her. And now in this moment, he is unfaithful. And the second case, he's going to be unfaithful soon. He's 53 years old, and he's very Catholic and conservative, and he loves his wife, but he has been without sex for 3 years, and he feels very rejected every day. So yeah, I have these two cases in this quarantine.
Right. Definitely. Have y'all noticed that maybe it's been a bigger decrease for people who were already cheating prior to lockdown, or does it not really make a difference?
Yeah, maybe a crisis prior to quarantine. And yeah, if you feel rejected and you feel not happy with your couple, so maybe you think about it, the infidelity and this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think the people that I've worked with, it's actually been the novelty of it and the changes to the routine, and also a greater sense of anxiety. Is this it? What is my life going forward? Does this relationship actually last? Can I see it lasting for the rest of my life? And if not, then maybe this is my opportunity to try and do something about it. And of course, with so many people transferring many of their work activities onto an online space, it was slightly easier to be able to say, oh, I've just got to nip to the study to have that Zoom call, when in fact what you're really doing is seeking out someone to be unfaithful with.
What's interesting also is that in the report, and going back to what Tammy said at the beginning, how before the pandemic, we had the distractions of going to work, meeting with friends, going shopping, etc. And that has all fallen away. And so now we're spending so much time together. And aside from the lack of sexual intimacy that is happening, people are also, and we found that in our report, more and more noticing sort of the peeves that they have about their better half. So whether it's that they're not giving them enough space or time, that they're not cleaning up after themselves, that they're spending too much time on mobile devices. And I guess this extreme situation is maybe also bringing out the not so glamorous sides of our character, to say it diplomatically. And of course that has been amplified by the situation that we're living in.
What are you saying? That I've been in my yoga pants for 6 months? I'm not sure what you're trying to say, Christoph. No, it's true. It's true. I also think that some people have a tendency to be nesters. They're very happy staying home, making sourdough bread, like cleaning out their closets. I've never known so many people to bake bread. It's a new thing. I don't know where that came from. But some people are naturally seekers. Like they it just neurologically, they want stimulation and they want to look outside of themselves for new things, for novelty. And that used to get taken up with looking for movies, finding a parking place, finding a place to eat dinner, you know, going out to work and interacting with new people. And now if you're in lockdown and you've been home for a couple months, you know, the capacity to seek new information has been sort of stifled. And I think, you know, because of the opportunity, like Lucy said, to go online, I mean, you know, you can cheat on your partner lying in bed next to them now. So Ashley Madison has been, you know, a vehicle for people to explore, even if they don't meet in person, even if they don't decide, you know, well, this isn't necessarily COVID worthy to go out and meet someone. They can seek a lot of new kinds of relationships online now that they've never been able to before. And it sort of satisfies that desire to go out and explore new things.
Right. I'm curious why that might be more satisfying than, you know, having sex with maybe a partner, because like Christoph said earlier, people are spending more time with their spouses than ever before, right? But, you know, most people are having less sex also. And 25% of people are finding it very distressing. Like that's the most distressing part of lockdown, the lack of intimacy. You know, I'm curious why that might be.
Well, I think unfortunately, the adage that familiarity breeds contempt holds true for a lot of relationships. And they, you know, a couple can get into very set grooves and routines of it. That's kind of what we as therapists do a lot of the time. But if you're getting into a groove and you're getting kind of worn down by the monotony of monogamy, then something fresh, exciting, not only, as Tammy said, kind of fulfills your need to kind of seek something else, bring new energy into your life, but it also acts as a transformative, has a transformative effect on you as a person. You suddenly feel more confident, more desirable, and you start to make comparisons about the person that you are in your marriage or in your long-term relationship compared to this real buzz and fantastic high that this new stranger brings into your life because they're paying attention to you, they're saying nice things about you. It flatters our ego quite a lot. That the absence of it means that a part of our identity then disappears or kind of goes to sleep. And if somebody can wake that up, then you feel more alive. So that's the draw. It's not so much having that sort of, you know, the steak at home, but actually the hamburger outside nevertheless has loads of trimmings and it's got extra mayo and a side order of chips. So it is very tempting.
Absolutely. That's actually a really great segue into the second significant finding of this study, which is that people are looking outside of their partner during these times of stress because of everything that y'all have talked about. You know, that steak at home isn't looking very juicy right now. You're looking for a hamburger outside. So Christoph, I'd love some more context as to this part of the study.
What's interesting, I mean, obviously, I think we've all been under stress and experiencing a whole range of emotions, and our members are no different than the rest of us in that anything from frustration to boredom to isolation, sometimes maybe also fear and worry. And they found that not only are they not getting the sexual satisfaction and support that they are seeking in these times, but they're also not getting the emotional one. And that's why they then started looking outside of their relationship for also that emotional support in the end. And so in the end, when we asked our members, what are the benefits of having an affair? And the most common ones were just someone to talk to, something to look forward to, something that gives them a sense of normalcy. In fact, 2/3 of our members say that their overall mood has improved because of the lockdown affair they have had in these past months.
Definitely. I mean, almost 100% of the respondents said that they wanted to maintain those relationships outside of the home, especially during the pandemic. So I'm curious what this kind of says about those marriages, if so many people are looking outside of their relationship for that primary source of support.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that we would assume that we could get all of our support from one person and that it's somehow pathological to seek out multiple relationships. You know, like that we would assume that one person for a lifetime is going to give us, all the stimulation that we need sexually, emotionally, intellectually. I think it makes sense for us to have multiple relationships in our life. I think the threat here, of course, is to have a monogamy agreement that explicitly says, well, you can't have sex with other people because that breaks our agreement. But it sounds like a lot of the relationships that people are looking for, particularly what's coming out in this study, is that people are looking for all kinds of relationships, all kinds of support, companionship, friendship, stress relief, adventure, novelty. And so I think it says a lot about how we need to have multiple kinds of stimulation in our life, whether they're compartmentalized and secret from our primary partner, or whether they're private and we don't necessarily talk about them. You don't come home from work and necessarily tell your partner everything you've ever said to anyone during the day, but now you're home all day. And so it's a little more complicated for some people who are feeling kind of shut down from those multiple relationship experiences. They don't run into people in the hallway or the coffee shop anymore.
I also think it speaks to how, for some people, having an affair is the way to preserve their marriage. That actually, if they didn't, then it would probably implode. But the affair acts as a kind of safety valve or a pressure valve, so that the other person can almost recharge their batteries or reinvent themselves, certainly bring different energy back into the marriage. And in many cases, it's not that they love their spouse any less. They don't, and they've probably developed a really amazing companionship, and maybe they're raising children together, or maybe they work together, or they have this really big passion project together, but there's something else missing. And I certainly worked with 2 clients, both women, interestingly enough, and they didn't know each other, but they both said the same thing, which is that my affair enables me to stay married to my husband. So that it was a sort of justification, but it was also an explanation.
Actually, what's really interesting also is, and actually for us not surprising, because in the end that's what our members have been saying for years, but only 1% of our members said that they are actually considering a divorce. And so clearly these people do want to stay in their marriages, but they are finding that their partner is not fulfilling them or satisfying them, giving them happiness 100%, which is illusionary in the end and utopian, really, to think that one person can do that for you every hour of the day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, etc. And so they look outside so that they are able to maintain their marriage.
Right. So affairs aren't just not impacting a marriage, but also just being helpful for people maintaining their marriage during this period of time. It's very interesting considering kind of the utopian vision, like Christoph was saying, of, having this one person that's supposed to satisfy every single need for you.
I think that kind of fairy tale narrative of find the prince, find the princess, and then live happily ever after. We all know that actually that's not happily ever after. That's the beginning of quite a lot of work, and enjoyable work, hopefully. Not trying to say that marriages are a real slog, but I think what people are saying, particularly in the survey, but anecdotally, we therapists will have also picked this up, is that affairs are seen by many people as a form of self-care, almost like going to the gym, having a reflexologist, joining a choir, that it actually recharges the batteries and is a really vital part of someone's self-worth, particularly if they're taking their sensual desires, their sexual needs as a priority, which of course many people don't do that. They get consumed by raising kids, looking after elderly parents, seeking promotion, and their sexual needs get kind of pushed further and down the to-do list. But I think that what the pandemic did was it just made people reappraise where they are in their life, and in the same way as lots of people suddenly realize that they've always hated commuting and they don't want to do it again, and therefore they're going to look to make some changes, in their work life, similarly, people are looking to their partner and thinking, is this really working? And can I see it working for me long term?
Right. And it's interesting because I'm curious if maybe this is what's ultimately led to the third finding in the study, which is the pandemic increasing people's desires to cheat, out of this kind of necessity for, you know, like you're saying, this self-care and this pressure valve for their marriages. So Christoph, I'd love to get a little bit more context as to this part of the study as well.
The numbers seem to say that it does. If we actually look at our daily average signups from 2019, they were 15,500. Already in the first phase of the lockdown, we experienced a 10% bump compared to those 2019. Actually, if you look at the last 30 days, we're now at a 40% bump compared to 2019. We have slightly over 22,000 daily signups for Ashley Madison. So it seems that, and I think we're still just at the beginning of the second wave, so I think this will continue exponentially, and clearly more and more new people are hearing about us and signing up to Ashley Madison. So obviously we're filling a need that more and more people are experiencing. And I think it will be very interesting to see what the both short, midterm, and long-term effects of this pandemic will be on the relationship models, the understanding of marriage, the understanding of monogamy, and I'm sure that our experts have some really interesting points and experiences to share there as well. And certainly the numbers seem to indicate that we are at a crossroads, right, when it comes to the idea of marriage and monogamy.
Definitely. I'd love to hear what some of the most creative things y'all are hearing are in terms of how people are even logistically setting up their affairs, because, you know, we can't be doing the same things that maybe worked in the past, like saying there's a business trip, you know, saying that visit family out of town, like those excuses aren't necessarily going to work when you have to be in lockdown, especially in the second wave. So what are some things that y'all have heard from people, or just in the report, you know?
Yeah, I have two examples because in Spain, people are really creative. And my private practice is in a conservative neighborhood in the center of Madrid. And I have a patient of mine told his wife that he's going to go to the church and pray. And in the reality, he was meeting his lover. So for me, it's like, you know. And the second story is another patient told his wife he went to play golf every Sunday for years. And at a wedding, one of his friends asked him why he has quit golf. And his wife knew at that moment in the wedding that her husband was unfaithful, and that he has not been going to play golf for years. Yeah, so very interesting cases.
Right, so we have golf, we have church, those are very creative.
Church is very creative, particularly given the context of where it took place. My worry is that we Brits were not very imaginative, because every single person that I worked with, it was a sport-related activity. It was either a personal trainer or a tennis coach. And I don't know whether that's what they said they were doing. That's what they said, I'm going to have my personal trainer or I'm going to have a tennis lesson. Because here, lockdown coincided with the most amazing weather ever that anybody could ever remember, particularly for Easter, because of course that never happens in the UK, it usually pours with rain. So everybody was allowed to have an hour outside every day as part of, keep the nation fit. And that's what people did. So my worry is that we weren't very, very imaginative, actually. Church is still the number one for me at the moment.
Absolutely. Spain is different. Oh my God.
That's funny.
So I'm curious how the biggest things that you've noticed have changed during the pandemic in terms of cheating, other than people saying that they're going to church to do their thing.
Well, what I found is that, for people who have really shut down their sexuality, have sort of decided, you know, the kids are home and being homeschooled is stressful. So I'm in Los Angeles, and the schools opened up and then they close, and then they open up and then they close, and people are sent home and then they go back to school, like the colleges, the elementary schools. And so parents who have young kids at home don't have any privacy. They don't have any place to have sex. They don't have any space from their kids. And so there's no break to not be parents. And so a lot of them have like repressed their sexuality. And there's a little bit of a like, don't ask, don't tell thing going on. Like, fine, go out to the gym, you know, like go out to like the beach, whatever. And it's sort of like a implicit understanding of, if, you know, we need to take care of ourselves in any way we can to get through this crisis. That the assumption is that this is an acute crisis situation and we got to do whatever we can to get by. As it becomes more chronic and we realize, okay, maybe this isn't going to end anytime soon, and maybe this is like the new reality, people are sort of reevaluating, like what is their life going to look like, and do we need more people involved in our life, whether it's people to come over and homeschool so I can go to work in my office down the hall in my house, or, you know, do we need other people in our relationship to have sex with? Do we open up the boundaries of our relationship? People are really reevaluating what it means to be monogamous. You know, do we have a more open monogamous agreement? Do I ignore the fact that you're on Ashley Madison, even though I found it on your computer? It seems like people are loath to create more crisis in their relationship in an already chronically stressful time in the world.
Right, absolutely. You know, I'm curious if that's maybe changed, a lot of these factors have maybe changed even the reason that people cheat. You know, if it's made cheating a more emotional process versus before it may have been more physical, or at least that's the perception that people kind of had of cheating. You know, when we can't be meeting in person and we have all, you think that it's more emotional now for folks.
It's interesting that before the pandemic, both for men and for women, the main reason was to have their sexual needs met, let's say. But now, in the course of the pandemic, the percentage of both men and women, or women and men, who say that they are looking for the emotional connection as much as the sexual one is rising. So we seem to be noticing a change in behaviors or initial motivation to look for an affair.
Although there was a study that came out last week here in the UK that said that half of Britain's population may never want to have sex again. So if you are married to someone in that who thinks that, and in fact 41% of people admitted to making themselves unattractive to avoid intimacy, so kind of not washing their hair, always wearing their tracksuit bottoms. Tammy, I'm not looking at you.
There's a reason you can't see below my waist.
But I think Christoph is right that actually people are now not doing it just, you know, as something that they would have done to get their sexual needs met, but actually it's a more holistic approach. It's actually seeking to repair something or nourish something in a more holistic way, because it isn't happening within the marriage.
I have a realistic model couple is something like that. Your expectations are here very high. My partner has to give me 100% every day for the rest of my life, and the reality is here. They're very low, like my partner is a human being. So I think the higher the expectation about your partner, more frustration, anxiety, and for me it's very important to have the same expectation and the reality in your couple.
Right. Definitely. That's a nice segue into the, you know, 5 finding of this study, which is that, you know, married people, kind of like what all of y'all have already said, married people are deeming that cheating is an integral part of self-care. It is absolutely necessary, not just to keep the marriage intact and to keep, you know, things going well at home, but also for their own mental health during this period of time. You know, what does it mean for cheating to be a form of self-care? Because oftentimes the way that people view cheating, it's this selfish act. You're just doing it because something's wrong with you. You know, why might that not be the case?
Well, I think it is a selfish act. It's about taking care of my needs. I don't think a partner being cheated on is going to see it as like, well, good for you. You took care of yourself today. You know, like that probably is not going to fly in the face of the person feeling betrayed. But on the other hand, if you're in a monogamous relationship with someone who says, you know, I don't feel like having sex, like Lucy said, like for the rest of my life, or, you know, until further notice. I mean, how long do you stick to that monogamy agreement when that person says, you know, I don't want you to have sex with anyone else, but I don't want to have sex with you? You know, how long do you feel like you're held hostage to that monogamy agreement before you say, okay, well, I'm not going anywhere, but I'm going to go take care of those needs? And, you know, it's not a form of what I call a can opener affair. Like I'm not doing it to break up, but I'm doing it because I want to stay in the marriage, and you're not giving me any other choice, really. So I think it's a betrayal of the monogamy agreement to not have sex, because we assume that you're getting married or in a long-term committed partnership to someone that you're going to have sex with for the rest of your life. That is kind of part of the implicit assumption. So if that person says, well, no, I'll be with you, but not have sex with you, that's kind of a big betrayal as well.
Another thing I've noticed, and it's something that I addressed in my TED talk, which was about infidelity, to stay or to go, was that sometimes the affair wasn't a conscious decision. It wasn't that someone was saying, I'm going to do this to get my sexual needs met, or I'm going to do this because I resent you for not putting out, or for, you know, wearing your tracksuit bottoms all the time, or whatever. But when the affair is perhaps discovered, that becomes a moment for the couple to really wake up and see what has been missed or what has been neglected. And I suppose it speaks to an idea that an affair doesn't always have to be a negative act. It can create a lot of pain and a lot of hurt, but out of that, particularly if a couple is minded to do some work on what led their relationship to be vulnerable to an affair, to be vulnerable to an outside attack, that, so to speak, then there is quite a lot of good that can actually come out of it. And it can also be because the other person, the person maybe who has the affair, does to some extent reinvent themselves and perhaps becomes more confident, more assertive, more able to vocalize what they really want in a relationship, because they've been able to get it outside the marriage. Maybe now they're better equipped to be able to come back into the marriage and say, okay, I agree, things weren't working, but I now know how to get my needs met, vocalize my stuff, and also perhaps listen to you as well.
Right. So there can be some therapeutic component to cheating, is what I'm kind of hearing.
Yes, as Tammy said, that if that's how you phrased it when you first revealed, or you were first discovered as being an adulterer, then it's never going to really fly. But if once that sort of intense arousal and emotion has perhaps abated a bit, both parties have the opportunity to see what went wrong in our relationship that would have led you to think or feel that actually you needed to go elsewhere. So it's the perfect opportunity to reboot.
And we have 3 types of needs as a couple: to feel loved, safe, and desired. And if one of these needs are not covered, you will look from them outside. And for me, the positive consequence or the therapeutic component of cheating, a lot. Like, decrease the conflicts at home. You value more the positive aspect with your couple, increase satisfaction, and being able to fulfill sexual fantasies and erotic desires, improve self-discovery, variety, improve your sexual life, increase your happiness as a human being, and feel alive and recover the passion. I have here an example. Maybe you heard about it. It's the triangle therapy of love. For me, it's so interesting, this triangular theory. It's Robert Sternberg is an American psychologist. He was a professor at Yale University. And he said has three components of love: is intimacy, passion, and commitment. And only 5% of the population has the complete love, and then 95% of the population is incomplete love. So maybe we think about it, why 95% of the incomplete love, the empty love, because maybe the expectations are really high, so we need to adapt.
And it makes me personally question, what the future of infidelity is, what the future of monogamy even is, especially when so many people are having that incomplete love, and reconsidering what that means, especially when most of us have infinite time to think right now. That's all you can really do in lockdown. So I'm sure a lot of people is on their mind, which brings, us to the fifth and final portion of the study, which is really looking at what that means, moving forward during the pandemic and post-pandemic. So I'd love to hear how, just from everyone, how y'all think that the pandemic will change cheating forever and change monogamy forever.
Well, I think we're going to have a much more open conversation about monogamy. I mean, it's interesting in the States that we are having a little bit of a slingshot effect right now. Like there's one portion of the population that's much more conservative about relationships and sort of trying to pull back the tide about all kinds of structures of relationship. But for the most part, I think we're going to slingshot forward, and people are discovering that you really do need a tribe, like you need a village to make relationships work. And I think people are finding in the pandemic and in the lockdown that it's not okay to feel isolated. The depression and anxiety that's caused during the pandemic is because of the lack of relationships, the lack of people and support systems. That's what we miss the most. And so because of the financial stressors and the emotional stressors and the lack of support systems, people are bringing more people into like their COVID families, if you will. And like Christoph has said, the increase in infidelity shows us that we need to have more people in our lives for our sexual needs. We need more support systems. We need people to help us with our kids. We're going to need people to help financially. So the more adults you have in your life, the easier life's going to be. So if we move into a more village system where we might have multiple partners, but everybody's on board, life's going to shift. And as we form those more tribal sort of relationships, the future of how we define monogamy and fidelity into sort of a more, maybe a polyamorous, it's going to shift. It's only inevitable.
We had a very interesting thing here in the UK very early with the lockdown situation, where there was a big debate about whether you could meet up with someone to have sex if you weren't in the same household. So everyone's locked down, but maybe you've just started going out with someone. And one of the chief health advisors was actually asked in one of the very early press conferences, what should people do if they had just started going out with someone? And she pretty much said, well, either you should move in together, but probably split up for the time being, because we don't really want you all to be having sex. So it was billed really as a ban on sex. It felt very Victorian. It felt very it felt like a violation of people's human rights, really. And it sparked a debate about what was essential. You know, if you're going to allow people to have 1 hour of exercise, how come you're not allowing them to have sex? Why is that activity so off limits? Well, obviously it's much more intimate than, you know, going jogging on your own in the park. But to what end then? What are we saying about people's mental health, people's capacity to find support in their intimate relationships? It led to a really big debate about how important sex really is in modern life.
Absolutely. You know, kind of on the topic of just sex and polyamory, non-monogamy, I'm curious how, you know, our societal expectations of non-monogamy and polyamory have kind of been impacted by this period of time.
I'm curious what it's like in Spain, Lara. How is polyamory seen there?
Yeah, here it's so interesting because I have a case in therapy of a couple, a man and woman, 7 years together, about how they want to open their relationship. And for me, it's so interesting because the most important thing is the both member wanted to open relationship, and they had to negotiate many boundaries and limits. And it's very important to negotiate the limits in an open relationship and review every like 3 or 4 months. And they have 4 rules. One is they having sex with a common friends. The second one is they have to use a condom. Yeah. And the third is it's not possible to repeat with the same person to have sex. And the number 4 is they can be emotional attachment, which is so important, with their sexual affairs.
Famous last words.
Yeah. You know, I'm curious how that session went for you, Letta, in terms of like what tips you can take and give to couples about how to establish those kinds of boundaries and even have the conversation like, hey, I want to open up the relationship. I think this could be good for us. I think a lot of people might want to, but have no idea where to even start.
Yeah, this is a process very interesting for me because I can say, okay, you need to use condom, or you don't have sex with common friends. It's a conversation, a communication between them, and I heard about it. Okay, how do you feel if with these rules? Do you feel okay, or do you want to change? But for me, it's only the translator to these necessities, but I heard about these rules, and for example, she felt bad at the first moment because you know, he felt maybe his couple tried to have an emotional attachment with their sexual affair, but now she felt very, very good, and now it's in this moment is a happy ending. This story.
That's great. That's really good to hear.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to tell people right now to just, audience members, feel free to submit your questions right now. We'll be taking them in the last 10 minutes, basically, of the panel. And I just want to leave our panelists right now with my final question, which is, how much do you think, you know, sex and having these kinds of emotional, like romantic affairs are part of a human rights discussion? You know, I know, Lucy, you kind of mentioned it when it came to like, okay, people get an hour of exercise, but not an hour of sex. You know, how much are we kind of entitled to having that kind of love and intimacy during this period of time, in which it is a kind of dangerous, but, you know, for our mental health, some of us really need that. Most of us really need that.
It felt like a return to the 60s when it became a more permissible topic and people's sexual happiness and fulfillment was put center stage. And I'm not quite sure when it all sort of changed, maybe during AIDS, I don't know. But it was almost like sex again got put back in some kind of box. And the last 15 years have been a bit of a shift. And I think the pandemic has accelerated that, so that people will start to really put their own sexual desires, sexual needs first, and also be more open, as you say, to have those conversations. Because one of the statistics in the Madison survey for Britain was that nearly 1 in 3 people didn't know what their partner's view on open relationships or non-monogamous relationships would be. So now's the perfect time to find out.
Lara, Tammy, do either of y'all have any final thoughts on that question? Or
yeah, my conclusion is very simple. I think the infidelity is the present and the future in our society.
I think that, it's interesting what Christoph said, that as many women as men are signing up for Ashley Madison, and the uptick from, up to 22,000 people a day. And I think that the expansion of monogamy, I think the increase in infidelity, I think a lot of it's driven by women. I think women are the gatekeepers of open relationships. It's not going to happen unless the woman in heterosexual relationships says yes. Let's do it. And I think women are more demanding of good sex. They want satisfying sex, and they won't settle for disappointing sex. And that is, like Lucy said, sort of an expansion of the sexual revolution. We're now in a revolution of monogamy, and that's driven by women's desire to be satisfied. They're not going to settle like they might have in the past, and they're not going to do it quietly either. And so I think we're seeing a whole new version of what sexuality is going to look like now and in the future going forward. Right now, women are busy. They're home, they're working from home, they're taking care of their kids, and they're getting their sexual needs met where they can. And we don't know what's going to happen after the lockdown or the pandemic and what the new reality is going to be. But women are not going to go back into the box. I can tell you that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I spoke to a female member from Spain not too long ago, and she was telling me that she was in her early 50s, had been married, or has been married rather, for a little over 30 years, so married very young. And for the last 4 or 5 years, her husband has no longer had interest in her or in having sexual relationships with her. And she also is only really discovering her sexuality now. And so she said, now I've signed on to Ashley Madison. She, just before the lockdown, she met a couple of people. She said that she's been trying out tantric sex. And we find also that women tend to be more creative during lockdown and are using sort of the virtual capabilities that exist and the technologies more so than men. And she says that she's having virtual sex. And so I wouldn't be sorry. I'm not surprised that you say that, Tammy, that women are discovering their sexualities and have been more and more over the last years. And I think that's a development that was long overdue, even though we started the discussion 50 years ago when the sexual revolution happened. But we're only now really starting to see that. I think it's really taking effect. And it's going to be very interesting to see how the next months and years, what changes they will bring to our societies and our relationships.
It's great that you mentioned technology in that response, Christoph, because we actually have a question from an audience member kind of on that. If y'all think that technology is an immersive enough medium for a pair of partners who aren't necessarily comfortable meeting in person to have an extramarital affair, because it might be hard to conceptualize just doing things through a screen and that being satisfying.
Well, I'm a member of a group called Women in Sex Tech, and the advancements in sexual technology and teledildonics make, sex over the web much more advanced, over a webcam than it's ever been before. So the capacity to have a sexual relationship online is more accessible for people than I think it's ever been. And I think there's going to be an explosion of sex tech going forward because of the demand and the need. This is creating the landscape, perhaps, that will create the bubble.
Well, funnily enough, quite a lot of sex happens in our head. So actually being present with the other person has never necessarily been the holy grail for all relationships. As anyone who's been in a long distance relationship will tell you, you can still have a lot of passion you can still have a lot of sexual fulfillment. Tech is only going to make that easier, you know, with FaceTime, Zoom, Skype, whatever, and with the way that tech can, you know, you can have vibrators that are synced to your partner's phone. There's so many more fun things that tech enables you to do, that in fact now we've got even more variety, even more potential, I think, to have sex not just with someone who doesn't live near us but they still live in the same country. The whole universe, the whole world is open to you, because now you can access them via tech.
Lara, do you have anything to say on this one, or?
Yeah, I agree with Lucy and Tammy. And I think for me, the pandemic is a mirror that you can see if you are happy with your life, with your couple. And for me, it's so important to think about it. I think this is a historic moment. And it's, you know, in the past, before the pandemic, I think that we are in automatic, you know, way. And now is the first time in our life that we can stop and really think, what do you want in your life? And for me, it's so important as a psychologist, think about it and think about how our society is going to be.
Christoph, this one is for you, I think, specifically, but another audience member wants to know if you feel that remote work has played any part and helped Ashley Madison's membership numbers at all.
I mean, if we look at, we talked a little bit about the excuses, and we heard some of the more creative ones. We did ask our members also what excuses they use, and they definitely have shifted now. So from the beforehand excuses that used to be, I have to work late, or I have a business trip, or I'm going to the gym, etc. It has now shifted to, I have a Zoom meeting, or I have a call with friends, or I have to run and do the grocery shopping. And so the excuses have shifted and are definitely now more related to the remote work. And obviously that gives people also the time, and we just talked about technology or virtual sex, also virtual affairs, cyber affairs playing a greater role than ever before. And obviously if you are with the door closed in your study, or even if you don't have that, if you go into the bathroom and close the door, but you are seeking these private moments at home to have some personal space and time, and to then also have an affair that helps you with your emotional well-being and your self-care, as many of our members believe.
One more question from an audience member. This one's interesting. For those that do take the risks to meet with affair partners, do you think people are being responsible in ways to offset that risk? For example, putting agreements in place so that they won't see any other partners.
So that's interesting, because it implies that, you know, people are having parallel monogamous relationships, you know, so they're meeting people and having outside partners, but they want sort of the same rules in a way, you know, and you know, maybe that's true, that they're sort of repeating the relationships that they know and looking for an expanded experience of monogamy just with multiple partners. I think some people do that. I think other people want the exact opposite. You know, they want to just have sexual relationships without any kind of commitment, and they're not looking for a commitment from other people.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting, if you look at our members, is that beforehand people were more open to having, you know, various affair partners, or also one after the other, and but also, you know, multiple affair partners at the same time. And definitely what we found in the report is that a majority of members, at least at the moment, are sort of monogamously committing to their one affair partner. And for the time being, and with the sort of immediate future, let's say, until a vaccine is found or a cure is found, people are being monogamous, so to say, with their affair partner.
Which I think is, you know, a reflection of COVID too. People want to be safe.
Yeah.
So they're expanding their COVID family.
Yes, I think they're taking COVID into account. So they're acknowledging that actually there are restrictions. and therefore let's create a kind of adjacent bubble. I'm meant to be in my bubble. I'm now going to create mentally and physically a slightly different bubble. But I do also think that it's age dependent, because some of the people I've worked with who are in their 20s are really not sticking to that rule at all. Which might explain why we've got, you know, a bit of a spike in numbers at the moment. But they're definitely just saying, I'm young, I've been told that this illness doesn't really affect me. So, and also that sense of, for people who got married very young, in their early 20s, in their late 20s, they might be revisiting that decision. And COVID isn't really going to stop them experimenting to see what else is out there.
Well, unless Lara, you want to add anything, I think that was our final question.
Thank you, Canela.
Yeah, thank y'all so much for providing lovely answers, for providing lovely insight, and having a conversation that some people might be a little uncomfortable to have. So it's a necessary one.